Well, good afternoon. Welcome. This is your final session of the day. We are the only thing stopping you from drinking. Most of you, there's a pretty good Ultimate Software contingent right here, so a couple of them I think have a few drinks going. So thank you guys for coming. It's been a really great session so far. I'm hoping you guys have enjoyed it as much as we already have. I can't believe we get 2 more awesome days of this. So welcome to Ultimate Software, moving to a data-driven approach. My name is Mike Longin. I'm a manager of software engineering at Ultimate. I'm a certified Scrum Master. I'm an Agile coach at Ultimate. I'm an all-around good guy, and I am a future Ironman.
And I'm Prateek Singh, and everything that Mike just said stands for me too, except for the future Ironman thing. I love playing cricket, and I love drinking scotch, so later on, if you guys want to talk some cricket over scotch, we can do that. That's apparently the only way you can understand the game. Earlier in the day, we learned from Jesper's presentation that if you show cute animals, people become more attentive. So here's a picture of my 3-month-old puppy, Kea. So just I think there's
a 12% improvement in 12%? Productivity. So
we looked up the study. It's from the Hiroshima University. There's actually a study out there doing this.
So the next 47 minutes of your life. So you guys got the countdown clocks going to the drinks. We're going to go over really 4 major points. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about Ultimate Software and just as a company where we've really been over the past 10 years. Second is just what is our data-driven approach? What do we mean by that when we're talking about it here? Finally, we're going to talk about the ceremonies that we've changed at Ultimate to really accommodate this approach. And then as we've taken this approach, where we actually have kind of ended up. And then we've taken a bunch of ideas that we've applied to the company, we've been really successful with, and we're actually taking it to the next level. And we're really excited where we're going from there. So Ultimate Software. So how many people that don't, okay, so let's start with it. How many people here work for Ultimate Software? Okay. All right, so
how many don't? Yeah.
So how many people that do not work for, if you don't work for Ultimate Software, raise your hand. All right, before this session, who here had heard of Ultimate Software that was already raising your hand? Okay, well,
couple of people.
Couple people, so we still have to tell you who the company is. So Ultimate Software, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary?
Yep.
25th anniversary. 2,500 employees, 2,800 clients. A couple clients you may know, Google, Major League Baseball Network, what's another good one?
Chang's.
PF Chang's, Blue Wing Brands, also known as Outback Steakhouse, so a lot of great clients. And we did $506 million in revenue last year.
And our development team, that's devs and QAs, 336 employees, about 20 teams working on 3 versions of the same product. So we only have UltiPro, and we have three different generations of it. We're distributed across 3 locations, down here in South Florida, Atlanta, and Toronto. That's just for the development team. We're going to use these titles interchangeably. We're in a habit of them meaning the same thing. So what used to be a Scrum Master on the Scrum teams, we eventually called them the LPEs, which were the team leads, and now the iteration managers, which for all intents and purposes means team lead on an Ultimate team. The reason we had to change this a few times is because we have had a little journey in Agile. We started with Scrum teams in 2005. After that, in 2008, we first started doing Kanban, and it was more of a Scrumban approach. It wasn't exactly a full flow Kanban. In 2012, we started the next generation of our product, and those teams started off back with Scrum. Eventually, in 2013, we went back and started re-implementing flow-based Kanban, retraining the teams with Kanban principles. And at this point, we have all development teams running in a flow-based Kanban system.
So you can imagine if we have a history like that, it probably wasn't the easiest thing. Anytime you leave a methodology and then go back to a methodology, there's probably something happened that caused those changes. So let's kind of talk about what wasn't going right over the past 10 years at Ultimate. So the first one was whether we were doing Scrum, Scrumban, Kanban, we always kept 2-week iterations. It's kind of strange because we weren't really following the iterations, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, that most of our stories took longer than 2 weeks. But we always had these iterations, and it was this very cyclical approach. You know, you talk about sustainability at your teams. You don't want you burning out your teams, and yet the way we were doing it, whether it was Scrum or Kanban, we were consistently forcing our teams to work nights every time a 2-week iteration boundary was coming. Second, and really this goes to the heart of what we're talking about, the majority of our decision making in Ultimate was really made by gut feel up until we took this more data-driven approach. And I don't want to belittle that too much because we were really good at doing gut feel. The core team, Ultimate Software has a 96% retention rate on employees, which means that our core people have been around for a very, very long time, and they really know their stuff. Which is great because even by gut feel, we pretty much knew every single release what we were going to put out. The problem is, and the fear there is, what happens if you lose one of those people? What if they want to go to a new position? What if they get it wrong once in a while? We wanted to become more predictable. We wanted a more data-driven approach that was really helping us ensure that the product we were providing our customers is exactly what they wanted. We also happen to have a lot of a mini waterfall approach. About half our teams are still on a 4-month release cadence, and we're actually talking about that a little bit later as well. And they tend to do a lot of upfront design, and then we're closing stories right at the end of the releases. It was continuously a problem that we wanted to get out of. And as I mentioned, really just zero predictability into our own output. So, by the way, I've been told to tell you guys this. This is the worst slide. You're going to see them all. There's no more slides that have more words than this slide right here. So good news is we got past that one. So the data-driven approach. So that's where we were. This is where we went.
So one of the first things we did was actually we started looking at our own metrics, and this is the tool that has helped us out quite a bit. Dan Vicanti sitting up front, his tool he brought in, Actionable Agile. So you're going to see a lot of charts and plots, and those are all coming from that tool. You have the tools, but you still have to understand which metrics you're looking at. So these were the 2 metrics that we have had the teams concentrate on. Your throughput, how many items you're getting done, and pushing out production over a period of time. Now again, done could mean anything, finished could mean anything, depending on the context of the team. Cycle time, which is the amount of time it takes for something that you started to actually get done. Again, we're in a Kanban conference. Everyone probably knows these things. Beyond that, what's hidden in those 2, if you guys are familiar with Little's Law, is the total work in progress. The biggest driver of these 2 things is the total work in progress in the system.
So for Ultimate's sake, when we say done, we typically actually do not mean ship to a customer. So we have 2 types of teams right now, a 4-month release cadence, a 1-month release cadence. We don't hold our stories in progress until we ship. We hold our stories in progress until it's signed off by a product owner, whether that's a business owner, business analyst, or in some cases what we call a product manager. For the starting point, we actually just call that when the first line of code is written. Your implementation may be, you can use it as an analysis step when your analysts are cracking the egg, so to speak, or like us, just when you start coding.
Yeah, and the eventual thought is to move both those boundaries out from the inception of the project to the actual delivery of the project.
So the cumulative flow diagram. So who here is really familiar with a CFD? Okay, I'm not. Who here wants me to at least explain what they're looking at on the screen right there? All right. At least 2 honest people.
2 hands, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to take
That's
that.
good.
All right, so we're going to cover the basics of a CFD. This isn't rocket science, but there's a lot hidden in here. One of our favorite stories we like to tell is we had a consultant come into the company one time, and we had just started using CFDs, and he helped us make our first CFD, and we go, wow, this is so pretty. Wow, this is great. I mean, look at all these lines and stuff, and it looks beautiful. And we're like, we're patting each other on the back. We're saying, great job, guys. Look at this. And the consultant's face is just like, what is wrong with you people? There's this wrong, this wrong, and this wrong. And that's what I want to kind of show you over the next 5 minutes is we're going to be showing you, we've learned how to start reading these CFDs and really make changes based on what we're seeing. So when you look at a CFD, the bottom is your time span. So here we're looking at basically most of 2015. Top is number of work items. Now, for what we're looking at here, this is based on stories, but you can use any type of work item you choose. You could do task level, story level, feature level, code shipped level, anything you want. Each color band represents a different status on our board. Now, this is kind of the humor of how Prateek and I set up this presentation. I'm colorblind, and whenever we show these kind of things, those are my slides.
Anything with color has mic.
That genius we did. So, what color is in progress?
You think I'm going to help you?
Okay, that band right there, whatever color that is, represents in progress. David, I'm going to get you up here next to. David's my one colorblind compatriot at Ultimate Software. So each band represents, if you look at a single like vertical slice, you can see there's probably, I don't know, 20 items in progress, 1 or 2 items ready for QA, 3 or 4 items in testing. It's giving you on that given day what your board looked like. What we're going to eventually look through here is we look for the trends. We want to see what those color bands are doing at any given time. The warning signs. So right here we have a big puffing of the board. And you see that up here they had 26 items in development. Back here probably 30 to 40. This team only had 5 team members. That meant that at that given time, each one of those team members was working on 5 items at once. Now, you obviously are going to see a couple things. I'm sure at least one of you is looking at this going, where are their work in progress limits? How can this be Kanban without it? Well, that's one of the things that we weren't really good at back in 2008, and we kind of left Kanban and go back to Scrum, is we weren't keeping our work in progress limits. But what we actually started doing was we started pointing this out and saying, by having such large gaps and so many things in progress at once, this was really driving our cycle times up. It was taking much, much longer for us to get our stories through. And you saw continuous gaps, that here's a gap, and down here's another gap. And what's interesting about this team is they gapped, and then they shipped a release right here, and they started gapping here. Notice right here kind of went away. This happens to coincide when we put them through a team Kanban training and said, guys, you guys are creating this big bulge of stories, and you're bringing all this stuff in, and nothing's going to get through. What we want you to do is go through here and say, just finish what you've started, and don't bring anything else in, and then start coming up and only having certain items in progress at once. This was a real big change for us, that we were really driving home this point of keep your work in progress in check.
Yeah, just one more thing with that. When Mike mentions earlier that you've got 5 developers with 26 things going on, it means 5 per person. There's studies that show that as soon as you get to 4 things per person, you're spending more time context switching than actually getting stuff done. So obviously that was itself contributing to things taking longer.
So flat lines are evil. So, and this was another one that, and by the way, this is actually all real data from Ultimate Software. So we actually, these are all kind of case studies inside, and we've been learning from. But any flat line on a CFD means nothing went in or out of that state, that column during that time period. So if we look right here from December 10th to about January 1st, this team only moved about 5 items into closed status. Now, I get we can say, well, Mike, it's Christmas, that's New Year's. But 5 items is really just not a lot happening. That's a big concern for us. And if you see right here, they had actually gapped up again. And again, nothing got closed, nothing got closed. And during this whole time, they're saying, well, you know what? We haven't closed the story just yet, but we're actually going to bring in some more stories. It didn't make a lot of sense when we kind of pulled back on the data. But what's interesting is that if you ask this team how they're doing, oh, no, we're doing great. We're working hard every day. We're putting in our hours. Everything's going good. But the data was showing us that something else was really happening at play. And again, it was one of those conversations that all of a sudden we got to about here, and we said, guys, you're going these long periods without any work getting done. What's wrong? What's the conversation we need to have happening? And I think that's a key point I actually think I glossed over earlier. We don't use this as leadership, management's going to come down and look at this flat line and say, you guys have gotten no work done. You guys all need to work nights and weekends to get it done and stay late and you're not doing your job. No, this is, why haven't you gotten work done is what do we need to help you get your work done? Do you have some type of external impediment that's keeping you from moving forward? Is your CI not, your continuous integration environment not doing its job and not letting code through? Do you guys have some kind of impediment in front of you? People on PTO that you need, another team's not letting you get the work done. It's a conversation driver.
And just as Mike was saying earlier, anything that doesn't have color on me belongs to me. So there you see all these gray dots. This is a scatter plot. Again, I'll ask the same question. Who hasn't seen a scatter plot before? Come on, people, raise your hand. OK, I got 4. Good. So similar anatomy. We've got calendar time on the x-axis and the amount of time it took to get a story from start to done on the y-axis. You keep plotting these dots. You go in, you say, OK, on December 31st, I did something that took 25 days. So I go to December 31st, go up, put a dot there. And as I keep doing that, I get this random smattering of dots. The insight we're getting from this is actually the 85th percentile. That's what we are publishing as our SLA on the team level, to say that when we do something, when a product owner gives us a story and we start it, it takes us 11 days with 85% confidence that it'll get done. Now, 85 is what we're guiding to. It depends on the team. If the team says that, my 85th and 95th, let's say this was 12 days, is not that far apart, I'll have 95% confidence that I can actually get this thing done in 12 days. So we're taking a probabilistic approach as opposed to averages or gut feel for that matter. This is where the whole data-driven decision thing comes in. Are we looking at our data to make predictions about how long it takes us to get things done? Or are we just going by gut feel? Now, this is stories. This could easily be features. We're starting to track our features this way as well and make those predictions as well. Talked about SLA. That's the exact same thing. This team does 85% of their stories in 10 days or less. They can easily tell their product owner, listen, I'm going to be wrong 15% of the time, but I'm going to get this done in 10 days. Now, if the product owner is accepting of that risk, well and good. If the product owner says, no, I need more certainty from you, okay, 95%, 14 days. I'm 95% sure that if you give me the story based on everything I've done in the past, I'm going to get this done in 14 days.
So a key thing to note there is, as we mentioned before, cycle time is one of our key metrics that we look at in our teams. And it's not just us as managers and IMs. It's not just our VPs or directors, but the teams are now looking at their cycle time. And we're saying, when you get that story from your PA or your business analyst, and they hand it to you, do you believe that this story can be done in 10 days, yes or no? It's a simple question, it's a simple answer, but that's the conversation we're now having. And what happens is when you drive your stories to that 10-day SLA, it actually starts driving them all down, because it's not, will it take 10 days, it's, will it take 10 days or less? So now most of your stories, 85% of them to be exact, are coming in at a maximum of 10 days. The majority now is you're not going to have those huge outliers. You're not going to have those 25, 30-day stories, because as you're going to see when we start talking about how we change ceremonies, we're not letting stories get above that SLA unless there's a legitimate reason why, and that legitimate reason is going to be pushed up and resolved one way or another. Yeah, and again,
once things get to this 95% line, that means this has taken longer than 5% of your stories from the past. Sorry, 95% of your stories from the past. So something's gone really wrong. At this point, what we've started doing is bringing that up at our scrums, at our product review meetings, without angering people and making them throw things at me, because I see the IMs in the crowd ready to throw things. But we'll bring that up so that we can, what that means is something went so wrong that you needed external help to fix this. And that's why we bring it up in the scrums. Now, just like the CFD, your scatter plot can give you some warning signs as well. Can anyone guess a release schedule from this? When we first saw this, similar story to what Mike was telling earlier, when we first saw this, we were like, oh, how pretty, look at that. Because it's making these nice triangle patterns. And then Dan actually looked at this and went, no, that's bad. What's happening is your teams are taking the entire length of the release to get things done. The longer the release has gone by, the longer things are taking to get done. There's no stability in the system. If you introduce a story at any point of time, you don't know when it's going to get done. Well, you know when it's going to get done. It's going to get done on release date. Because we're going to do everything possible, nights and weekends, right at the end of the release, to actually get that done. And I'm not sure if it's done at that point. I just said it's done. Maybe I've got calls from support coming in the next 2 weeks. But this was what we saw. As Mike mentioned earlier, we released 4 to 5 months, and you can clearly see that in this graph.
Yeah, I mean, just show of hands. Anyone else have that end of a release? We get a lot done, and that's kind of the normal. Yeah. Your data probably looks like that. If
you start looking at your data, it'll look like that. And if you start driving to get things done quicker, it'll probably fix itself too.
Did you check the dots in between the triangles are actually the fixes for the stuff that is done?
It's actually both. There are some functional defects in there. There are actually support calls fixes in there as well, and there's regular story work in there as well. Yes. But if you don't manage those with each other and don't maintain an overall whip on that, that will happen. Yeah. So this is a team's data that's very near and dear to my heart. I've worked on this team for 2 years now. We were doing Scrum at this point from this time period where this data is from. if you look at that if the 85% that we talked about, it's at 30 days. 85% of the stories for this Scrum team were getting done in 30 days or less. We were running 2-week iterations. We were running 14-day iterations. And, to mind you, we were maintaining velocity. We were producing 30 points every iteration. But ideally, it should have been 14 days for most of our stories. This cycle time was hidden behind the velocity metric for us. So if you see a Scrum team or a team that's iteration-based, that's running iterations, and most of its stories are running longer than that, there's probably something there, which didn't reveal itself to us from velocity, but it did reveal itself to us when we started looking at cycle time.
So we have data now. We didn't have data before, but now we have data. So what are we going to do with data? And we really adopted, I don't want to call them the Scrum ceremonies, but really the Agile ceremonies. We took out the 3 major Agile ceremonies that we use on a daily and weekly basis, and we changed them to really take into account this new data-driven approach. So the first one from a story perspective was planning and estimating. We changed how we plan, and we plan our features, we plan our stories, and how we do estimations around it. Second was our stand-up. We left the Scrum-driven stand-up and went to what we call a flow impediment-driven stand-up. And finally, we changed how we did retrospectives. All 3 of these really, they changed the daily life of every team member on our development teams, and even on the upper management level, because the data they were getting from the teams via impediments was different as well. So, this slide doesn't look, I'm going to say what everyone else has said. Hey, it looks much better on this screen. So this is kind of my favorite slide of all of them, because I got such a good laugh when we did this. I'm sorry. Is Chris in the room? I'm going to call Chris out.
Yes,
so this was Chris's team slide. So you can't really see it right here, but what Chris did was he mapped for his team. I can't even apologize. You can't really see. This is his 3-point stories. So his 3-point stories were taking. He had 19 of them, and they were taken on average 17 days. His 5-point stories, which he also had 5 of them, took 13 days. Thank you. So his 3-point stories took longer than his.
You still can't read it.
It's faded. His 3-point stories were taking longer than his 5-point stories. Now, that's crazy. I mean, it's not just like a few outliers. Consistently, his 3-point stories were taking longer than his 5-point stories. And you can't see it as well, but his 2-point stories took about 8 days, and his 3-point stories took 17 days. Now, we looked at that and said, wow, that's unbelievable that we are so bad at our estimates. And when we talk about estimates, Ultimate has done really the classic Agile estimation solution. So when we look at our 4-month release cycles, we used to take about a day to do estimates for, the team would go out, members of the team would go out and for 1 day would do planning for their entire release and come back and give these estimates. And we started getting data like this, and we said, our estimates aren't good. So the solution, instead of doing 1 day of planning, was 2 days of planning. So we did 2 days of planning, and our data wasn't much better. So can anyone guess what the next solution was?
3 days.
There you go. This was not a good cycle to get in. And once we started having really hard data like this, we realized it's not working for us. These hard estimates weren't providing any value. We couldn't give a better estimate to our customer on how long something was going to take. We couldn't give better estimates to ourselves on how long something was going to take. This was becoming problematic. So now we have this SLA-driven approach, which is we're not going to do true estimates anymore. We're not going to throw down a 1, a 2, a 3, or 5 card. We're just going to do an estimate against the SLA. Is this story going to take 7 days or less, or 10 days or less? And teams' SLAs, as Prateek mentioned, are all different. We don't force teams onto the SLA. The team themselves come up with the SLA. So your estimating session is merely, is this going to be 7 days or less? If someone comes out and says, I don't think it's going to be 7 days, it's not a huge fight anymore. It's just, why don't you think it's going to be 7 days? What do we need to change to make it 7 days? Can we bring stuff out of the story? Do you need to do research ahead of time? So everyone's probably had the developer come up to them and go, you know what? This is the first time I've played with Golang or Python. I need some time to research that. What am I going to do about that? And a lot of times the answer has been, well, just start the story and we'll see what happens. The approach we now take is, our SLA is 7 days. You have 7 days to go research that, and we're going to call that a research story. But you're time boxed. In 7 days, you tell us if you have a solution or not, And if we need to go more, at the end of 7 days, we're going to talk about it. Everything is very, very time-boxed. We're having conversations. Everything is about keeping us in check with the SLAs and making sure we're talking. Way too often we've had those situations where we just get into a trouble and we don't know. And that's actually the root cause of this line right here. What was happening on this was, because Chris actually went and did a little bit of retrospective on it, he found that his developers and his testers, they knew a 5-point story. They were sure, you know what, that story is going to be challenging. I know it's going to take a couple days to do. But the 3s, they weren't sure about. There's the ones that their gut was telling them no, but for any reason they said yes. So a little nervous, or maybe that's going to be hard. You know, we've done this language before, but it's a slightly new pattern. It's not going to be. That's what their 3s were, and that's what got them into trouble. The new result of this is they're going to sit there and have a different conversation of, hey, we haven't done that pattern before. Can we do something to kind of research it, play with it, and then we'll go back to that story.
Here's the fun part about this one. If you're running canonical Scrum, this team would be allowed to do a 1-point story, a 2-point story, not a 3-point story, but a 5-point story. For a 2-week iteration team, because it won't fit in the iteration if you try to do a 3-point story. While if you try to do a 5-point story, it most likely will fit.
But again, this all came back from our data. We didn't know this. We assumed everything was working well. Our velocity told us everything was working great. And again, the team was consistent on velocity, but their actual data of how long they were taking their stories was kind of a hidden metric that until we bubbled up, we weren't aware of. So daily stand-up. How many people are doing a Scrum style? This is what I did today. This is yesterday. This is what I'm going to do today. This is what's holding me up. Show of hands. How many people's stand-ups take more than 10 minutes? How many people's stand-ups take more than 15 minutes? Let's see, 20? Our stand-ups we try to keep under 5 minutes. The way we do it is we do it as a story-based stand-up and an impediment-based stand-up. So, say again? Oh. So we're only talking about the stories that are really in danger. So if we look at this here, we've got a couple dots that I've pointed out. The story's down here. If it's in progress, it's only been there for 2 or 3 days, our 85th percentile sitting up here at 13 days, we're not real worried about that story. I'm not going to bother talking about it. Now, the developer may say, hey, I need to talk about this, and we're talking about it, but we're not going to make that as a talking point. And over here, it's in testing already. Again, not talking. Even this story, if you notice the tool we use, color codes, and the bands are progressive, because as long as this stays within the green band? Green?
Yeah, that's green.
As long as we stay within the green band, we're probably going to get it done within our 85 percentile. So this story, again, we're not talking about. But already up here, that's already in our red band. We're talking about that story. In fact, we've probably been talking about these 2 stories for at least 5 days. That's a story we're going to hit on. And again, we're not attacking the developer working on it or tester working on it. We're asking, what's happening here? What do we need to do to help you? Do we need, the last presentation, we were talking about swarming stories when necessary. This is a story we're going to swarm. Or maybe this one has an impediment that's outside our control. We have a Scrum of Scrums. This is the story we want to be bringing up in Scrum of Scrums. This story. And this story, actually, we might be talking about. Maybe we're not in Scrum of Scrums yet, but it's already starting to move up a little, still in development. We would rather already see it up here. We're going to have a real quick conversation, just a gut check on this. Everything going good? Yeah, it is. No. If it's not, we're talking about. But the point is, we can do a stand-up on this board in 5 minutes and move on. Now, when we initially did that, we lost a little bit of the human element of the stand-up. Part of a stand-up is, I'm on a team, I want to know what the team's up to. So the way we kind of solve that is, after you go through a board is, most teams are asking anything else. And that's the standard, I'm going on PTO, I'm going to be at this great conference in Miami Beach while you guys are all working. You know, I got a doctor's appointment, or, you know, I am on this story down here, and I know it's in the green, it's going good, but I think we're going to have a problem. Can we talk about this one? That's how we're covering those, but these are the major pieces that we're talking about as part of our stand-up. And I for one, and this makes my job as an iteration manager so much easier, because this is the information I need to know and need to be sharing and really need to be using to help my team.
Yeah, and getting back to your point of stand-ups taking long, the teams at Ultimate with 30 people on the team, and last Friday, one of the teams, the stand-up was 4 minutes. I was timing it. And that same team used to take about half an hour to do their stand-up about 2 years back. So.
And the reality was, we're getting more out of the stand-up now.
Yeah.
It's not that we're lost. I mean, we're getting more because we're centering. And you know, how many people in their stand-ups have watched their teammates' eyes just glazed over because they don't care? That's what this is trying to eliminate, is that glazed over, that I don't care, that's not my story. We're talking about what's important. You're doing the first 5 minutes. The caffeine probably from the coffee is just kicking in. They're ready to talk about it, and then we're ready to get to work. So the result of that is when we start getting into trouble, we stop. So this is a team that they were kind of getting into that triangle pattern already we showed earlier. And then they started after going through a little training that when these stories get up here, we're going to talk about them earlier. And they started leveling off. And we actually have a couple more slides like this, but again, it's coming down into that daily stand-up. We're going to attack the stories that are getting up high to keep it from happening. One of the key things that we really believe is long stories beget long stories. If a story's taking long, it's not only going to take longer than we thought it would, the next story behind is probably going to go slow down as well, because now your QA or your developer is now caught up dealing with that story. Maybe you're having to pull more and more people to swarm. We want to get the stories done as fast as possible. We want to reduce the risk inherent in a story, especially a story that's taking a long time.
Now, onto my favorite topic, retrospectives. You guys saw this graph a little earlier. This was the team with the 30-day, 85th percentile cycle time. We, at this point, tried to look at the scatter plot and figure out what's really going on. We saw these pretty little diagonal lines. Like, why are we seeing these diagonal lines? This is how we're doing our retrospectives now, rather than going through, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better. We're actually pulling up our data and looking at patterns. Saw the diagonal line, and then started talking about these individual dots. Found out they were all dependent stories. Couldn't finish this one without doing that one. Couldn't finish that one without doing the one before that. It's really exciting stuff, actually. It's local income taxes, for those interested in taxes. We couldn't do any of that. In fact, this last story over there took 58 days, and when we looked at it, it was sitting on the board for 53 days. So we actually worked on it only 5 days, but it ended up all the way up there. We talked about this. What happened here? Why did we get these patterns emerging? What had happened was the developers said, it's just easier for me to code all this stuff over and send it over to the ready for QA column that we had. And the QA said, I couldn't test the next thing before testing the first thing. So the QAs went over, started picking off one by one, getting that stuff done. Our immediate reaction? Well, we need to put in WIP limits. We cannot allow our developers to push all this code over and have to wait to get this stuff tested. We did that. We did a couple of other little tweaks in that retro, and our data looked like that immediately after that. We're getting 85% of our stories done in 13 days, immediately after that. After just making those little tweaks. You can see that's October 11th, exactly the same time scale. You can see that we've actually lowered our cycle time at the 85th percentile to 13 days. Now, again, the answers might not be the same for everyone. When you look at your scatter plot, when you look at your CFD, it'll highlight different problems. It'll make you ask the right questions. It might not necessarily give you the answers. And that's why we prefer to do this in a retrospective rather than just getting the feel of it. In fact, by that time, we had been doing retrospectives every 2 weeks. This never came up. Other things came up, doing a more subjective retrospective where what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do better. This never came up. That's another fun one. How many developers, initially Mike had shown a team with 5 developers on it. How many developers do you think worked on this project? It's actually 1. It was the same developer that started work here, got all this work done, dumped it on his QA. As they were testing this, went over here, did all this work here, dumped it over, and then started the 3rd project while the first one was still getting done. How many people have actually been developers over here? All right. I'm on my 3rd project right now. You're on your 3rd project right now. It's been about 30 days since you last coded that first project. QA finds a bug in it. Do you have any idea what that bug is? My retention cycle time is about 3 days. 30 days is way too long. But that's what we got into. That's what this team realized. When they saw this, they saw these pretty lines appear. We actually call this the Matera curve. He's not here right now. Mike Matera, he's the developer. We call this the Matera curve. you'll see that actually we don't have the data. We don't have a slide with their data from after this, but their data actually stabilized quite a bit. The developer learned that him being a superstar developer wasn't helping the team. Him actually jumping around and helping QA actually test his stuff was what was really helping the team.
What's funny is just like a random story. It just happened. Today's Tuesday, Monday. I think it was Thursday last week. I was talking to Matera, and he was so excited. He goes, "I just got permission to write test cases. I'm so excited I can finally help my team write test cases." It was a really big deal. Now, Matera, I feel bad. Hopefully he won't watch this. Matera is just an Uber developer. He loves to be a developer, and yet hearing him brag that he could write test cases now and help his team, it comes from this kind of data.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, so Ultimates, we have a fairly slow release cadence. We know that, 1 month or 4 months. But if you think about this from a continuous delivery model, do you really want to still have people testing one delivery when you're already coding 3 ahead? What if when you ship this, you learn something? You learn that we don't even want to do that. So now not only has he maybe has to go fix bugs on this, but he's actually completely wasted all the work that he had done. He could have been working on something else that your customers actually needed. So that's another big one that we've learned, that as we move to a faster and faster release cadence and we're HR, our customers, we're still kind of helping them acclimate to a faster release cadence. That's a big thing that we're learning ourselves about how we're going to change our behavior.
Yeah, scrapping of that second project would be a huge cost if he had moved on to the second project the way he did already, as opposed to actually helping the first project finish. So we see all these graphs and all these plots, and they mean a lot when the team dives into them. But where do we go from there? What we've started doing in the team rooms is actually putting up scorecards. This is the scorecard for the team I work with. I believe in simplicity. I believe in physical boards. I loved seeing the enterprise-wide physical board earlier. And it's just a little whiteboard. When that number in that whiteboard is green, we're doing great. When the number in that whiteboard is red, we're not doing as well. It's a simple indicator. Anyone walks into the team room can look and see, is this team in a good place right now or not? And the team also has a target to get that to a good place. Our target is 10. So since it's 7.75, it's in red. When it's above 10, it's in green.
So kind of continuing the trend of what should a colorblind person do when they create a scorecard. This is my scorecard, nothing but color. So it looks a little bit complex, but there's actually a lot of simplicity. If any piece of the board is red, we have a problem. If it's green, we're good. Now, we can kind of dig into the pieces of information. So this tile here is our build status tile. All those different pieces of information are useful, but we're not going to really pay that much attention unless it's red. Once it's red, it's drop everything and fix the build. Another 2 tiles we're going to look for right away is stories near SLA violations. So I mentioned earlier my team has a 7-day SLA. Once the story is in progress for about 5 days, and we actually didn't cover this yet, but we do calendar days, not working days. So my team is Monday to Monday. The reason we do that is we don't talk to our customers in business days. We talk to them in calendar days. If we say we're going to have it done in 2 weeks, they're expecting it in 2 Mondays from now. They're not expecting it 2 Mondays plus a Wednesday because that's what really 14 days is. So once we get to Friday, we're already talking about what do we need to do to get these stories done quicker. Is there a problem already shaping up? Another thing that we're going to automatically talk about is stories that are on hold, or also known as blocked. If a story is blocked, this card immediately turns red, and we're going to swarm and try to figure out what's going on. Most likely, that blocked status is outside of our team's control. Another team, possibly servers have gone down, or we need a developer from another team that we didn't initially realize when we took on the story. This is going to get bubbled up in the scrum of scrums. If it's early in the morning, if it's later during the day, I'm going to be running around our halls until I find someone and get it solved. On this board, we also use kind of a left to right pattern. Stuff over here is stuff that we have immediate control of. Right? If a story is near SLA violation, the team can immediately swarm. Current stories in progress, we control our own whip. 4-week cycle time, this is a rolling 85th percentile. We can't control that by one change we make today. But if we keep all these green, this number will go back. We try to keep it 7, this card will go back to green. I really, really like this kind of scorecard. I have a 100-inch flat screen touch panel display in my office. So it's really bright and easy to see, and we have this constantly up in front of it. So it really, really works for us.
The only issue with that is it's orange and green and not orange and blue.
Is Larry in here?
He's not.
No, we don't have
Anyway,
Larry.
go Gators.
So that's kind of wrapping up. We did have kind of one question. Who here is not from Florida? Who here likes the palm trees outside? That's our headquarters. So a little bit of a shameless plug. If you have any interest in actually seeing palm trees on a daily basis and actually wearing flip-flops more than just when you come down to a conference, just let us know because we'd love to talk to you because we have been really hiring, especially for that kind of coaching IM type role. That we've got some positions open.
And finally, that's our info. That's Mike's Twitter handle. If you want to get a hold of him on LinkedIn. Same for me. That's my blog. If you guys want to go out there and read some Agile stuff that I put on periodically, we're going to actually publish the slides there as well. We're going to probably publish a PDF of it and a little description of it out there as well if you guys want to pick that up later. And other than that, any questions? Yes?
Oh, wait. I know they need the mic.
Oh, actually, you're going to use the mic. I'll actually take it that way. I can answer it too. That works out.
My question is about this SLA that you look into on your stand-up meetings. So you said that 85% of the time the stories must be, let's say, less than 7 days. So obviously 15% of the time they must be more than 7 days. So how do you decide that if a story is more than 7 days, it is something wrong? Statistically, you should expect a certain number of longer thinking time.
Absolutely, and that's why we're talking about the 85% because usually not all things are under the team's control. And when something has gone over 85%, it's most likely something happened that wasn't under the team's control. I'll just flip back to that aging chart that Mike was showing earlier. Sorry. Because we're not going to talk about it on the day it exceeds the SLA. We're probably talking about it a lot earlier. We're probably talking about it when it's somewhere here, when it's early on in the process, and it looks like it's going to exceed the 85th percentile. We're talking about it much earlier to mitigate that risk. And if it's unavoidable, it's unavoidable. Every once in a while, there will be things that will happen that are not under our control. And that's why we're talking about the 85th and not the 100th or the 95th percentile.
And also it goes back to that we're using the 85th to drive the 85th, meaning if we have these stories at 7 days, we're trying to control those 15% and make those even lower. So we're aiming every story for 7 days. When one starts getting near it, instead of letting that story get up to 15 to 20 days, we're being much more aggressive on it and trying to catch it before it gets to 10 days or 13 days. It changes how we attack the stories. Attack's actually probably a fair word. The teams go after it. One of our IMs, who's sitting over there, I'm going to point out Jennifer, was talking to us the other day about her team, when they see something getting near the SLA, they've gamified it so much that they make sure that story can't get over it. That is a hard line to them. They're not going to let it get past. And that's the kind of behavior we want. We want the teams saying, we will not let these stories get out of hand. We don't want these 45, 60-day stories to happen anymore. We're going to take control of our own boards.
Hey there, I'm Heidi.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the people care that you do to complement all of this.
Let's start out with this really important thing. The minute we brought this, people immediately got a little scared. Oh my God, metrics, my salary is going to be based on it. That is the number one question you get anytime you get it. And the first and most important thing to say is every person from the IM on above the team is going to reiterate the point that we are not going to use these metrics to drive performance bonuses. We're not using it to drive salary. We're using it to drive conversations. When stuff gets out of hand, you need to be bringing it up. And I would only go so far as to say a team can get in trouble with these numbers is if the numbers are getting out of hand and they're not making people aware of it. And the awareness is simply at the scrum of scrums, we have 3 stories that have gotten out of control and we need a little help getting at it. Or pulling the director into that conversation of saying, hey, we have trouble here. That's what these metrics are meant. It's one of the things, especially when we started, so the way we rolled this out to all of our teams was we initially took all the IMs and we put them in a 2-day training of Kanban metrics. And that was great. The IMs really knew it, and they went back to their teams, and the teams didn't get it because the IMs, they understood it, and they kind of even got the base concepts behind it, but they didn't have a good enough ability to share it with the teams. And so the teams got scared. I'm kind of guessing what you're hinting at, but they thought that we're going to use these metrics to drive all these horrible HR practices. We then said, okay, let's bring the teams in. And the first thing we did with the teams is saying, this isn't meant to be punitive, it's meant to do the conversation. You don't want stuff that looks like this. You don't want to work nights and weekends anymore. You don't want the last 3 weeks of a 4-month cycle to be, hey, we're bringing you lots of lunch because you got to be in the building 10 hours a day. And hey, you remember that Sunday trip you're going to take with your family? You can't do that anymore. That's not what you want. This is all to avoid that, and it's actually to create a much more sustainable pace and then help you have the work-life balance that actually Ultimate Software really preaches.
Yeah, Mike already hit that point. If we level this off earlier, we wouldn't have to. If we take the pressure from the end of the release and spread it out evenly, at least we don't have that night and weekend thing going on later. One thing that you kind of prompted in my head was Ultimate's tagline is people first. So that's what we're looking to do, even for our people and for our customers.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Happy with it. Thank you, I guess.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.